Welcome to Innersight, Health Optimization with Rudy and Sean.
Welcome to podcast number 14. So that means we're into our new year. Sean, we've had some great feedback from our previous podcast, Iron, and moving on today, going from longevity to health span, to actually how we look forward, how we enjoy life and not kill ourselves.
Yes, it's been a journey. And today will be a bit more about performance and not so much the medical side. I think some of the guys out there would love this podcast, especially because we get confronted with that 35, 45 age group that, you go through stages in life, and then late 20s, early 30s, we tend to get kids. Then exercise goes down the drain. And then a couple of years later on, you realize the kids is a little bit bigger. You can start to exercise again. And then you want to do something. And now we see people that come to us and try different types of things. So we thought maybe we get someone in today to speak about one of the things that some of our clients get themselves into, called the Ironman.
I think that leads us to introducing our guest today. So, like we do normally, we bring in the experts with things that we don't know everything about. So I want to introduce Dave Sullivan. He's the owner-manager of Wingman Multisport Coaching here in Cape Town. So he is pretty much a specialist on running athletes, triathletes, swimmers, runners, taking them up the hills and mountain running or trail running. So Dave, welcome.
Thank you. How's it?
Yeah, so it's quite an interesting thing. Like Sean said, we get confronted with how do I move having from being a couch potato to running or doing an Ironman. So for our discussion, we'll go with a half Ironman first and not just do an Ironman. So maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the game of endurance sports, and then we can lead on and try and help our clients or our listeners how you would move forward.
So like most of my athletes, I played rugby. I didn't do any endurance sports. I tried to get out of it at school. I did rugby, soccer, cricket, squash in my adult life, gym, bodybuilding. And then I heard about Half Ironman the first time, and I bought a magazine program and I followed it through to the T, and I did it. And I've just fell in love with the sport, and anyone that does start it just becomes obsessed with triathlon. That's what's the main attraction of it, is just how it takes over your whole life, just health-wise and stuff like that. So I started a run group in the northern suburbs of Cape Town. I had a few people. It was 4 or 5 of us. And then it just evolved. I partnered up with another group that did group-specific training for Half Ironman. And so it was a one program for all, meeting Tuesday, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays. And we started in the northern suburbs, and I took 5 people to the first Half Ironman, and it just absolutely exploded. We went to 52 people in the second year, 70 in the third year. And I realized there was a business to be made out of it, more than just the hobby of it. Took on a business partner who he and I then flew to America. We did all the coaching certifications. We did our own research. So I don't have the scientific background, but I'd have the people background and my own experience of this whole thing. And and then it's been a learning process the whole way through, because each person differs so much. And each day we learn more and more, and grown into a nice, healthy business, helping people across the country. We're mostly online, do a few group sessions still, but it's all online business.
That's amazing. So for the people that have seen an Ironman, you've got quite a distinctive kit. So that's quite cool with the yellow stripes. And so how many people do you take through an Ironman, let's say either the full or the half Ironman journey in a year?
In PE this year, we had 18 for the half, and we had 12 for the full Ironmans. Yeah, so it's usually around that number.
Yeah, so that's
maybe just for the listeners out there, can you just maybe say what's the difference between a half and a full Ironman, just for interest sake?
So it started as a full Ironman. A few legends on Hawaii decided to challenge themselves. So it's a 3.8 kilometer swim into a 180 kilometer bike, and then a 42K run. And then the half came along, and that's then exactly half the distance. So 1.9, 90K and a 21K.
Cool. Okay, let's move on to the guy listening or the girl listening, had their babies, or they just are keen to start with a half Ironman. So, and they get to you, sign on online, and how does this process start? How do you measure? Where do you start?
By the time they've gotten to me, I realized they've already booked accommodation, entered the race, bought the running shoes. So they want to start tomorrow. So it's quite a quick process by the time they've gotten to me. It's quite an overwhelming thing once you look at the distances and all that you need to cover and balance it. But I always start out with just number one is what injuries are you carrying and stuff like that. And then just how much time they have on their hands. It's usually a call or a bit of understanding of what goes on in their life. And then we just start to build consistency on that from there. And what are the expectations from it? That's a big thing. And I myself, I'm 42 and I have a 9-month-old child. And I've realized after 10, 15 years of doing this with all the time in my hands, now realizing that there's very little time in my hands because there is a child walking around or crawling around, and trying to really get a grasp of how much time they have to train and just what the expectations are from what their goals are. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about expectations. So if you start off, you've got, let's say, the average guy, let's talk about a 40-year-old. So he's got to do 3 disciplines, and let's say he has to do at least 2 hours, I presume, on each discipline in a week. Mm-hmm. So that takes you to 6 hours already. So it's almost a whole new day that they have to plan somewhere. So is that about correct, or do they have to do more or less? Or
most athletes would have favored one of those by the time they've gotten to me. So they have been cycling, they have been running. Hardly anyone has a swimming background. I don't know what it is, but we all had pools and oceans. Well, the coastal guys had oceans and inland had pools, but just no one seems to have a swimming background. But usually they've favored one. They've had a running background or a cycling background. And then it's identifying what the weakness is and what they really need to work on and all that. But it is a lot of puzzle building because you need to get in all. The ideal week, if everyone had all the time on their hands with a job and children, would be 3 swims, 3 to 4 bikes, and 2 to 3 runs. But not everyone has that time. So it is a bit of shifting around and where the focus needs to lie going
so at what point, time-wise, if a client tells you, listen, I've only got X amount of hours, would you say that's not enough? It's a difficult question because it will differ between different persons and age groups, but just more or less a ballpark figure.
I need at least half an hour a day, and my programs and a lot of these programs are based on consistency, and you get a lot of guys that only have weekends and stuff. And then I will be honest and say, like, you can do it and you can get the medal, and we could probably all go and fight for that medal, but it's what it's going to do to affect your life going on from there, because it's just how much it impacts you, the actual events, more than the training. But I like consistency. It doesn't have to be every day, but at least doing 5 out of the 7 days something, whether it be one or the other, but at least 30 minutes. So there is some activity on the body, you get busy. And so people will then not train during the week and then bang out massive long weekend sessions, but nothing really been gained by that other than ruining your weekend and making yourself tired into the week. So at least 30 minutes a day, 5 out of the 7 days of the week. You can do something with that, yeah.
So we're going to talk about training tips. So that's actually one of the first training tips is to stay consistent. Get yourself on a bike or on the road or in the pool. That you have to get that. So we talked about the time commitment. So we've said, okay, but you have to have a body to move around. So for us, we probably would have been in the step before that. So you have to make sure the guy's got a ticker that would take it, has got lungs that would take it. So, and then obviously no major injuries. So if we talk about injuries, what type of things do you see or would exclude? And then what are the most common type of things that will throw you off course?
It's a lot of knees. It's a lot of knees, whether it has been a rugby player or something like that. It's a lot of people having to work around having a bad knee or knees, which you can do by easing off on the running. I don't like the back stuff. That's scary for me when they are on Pilates 6 times a week because they've had a fusion and stuff like that, because you're moving the body in lots of ways now, but invariably by the time they've gotten to me, someone has cleared them, and that's when they've seen people like you or their physiotherapists. But yeah, there's a lot of those, but a lot of knees, shoulders, and backs, and those are things that we just have to really work around, which we can, and that's where I try and add a lot of value in working around those. But those are the big ones, yeah.
So again, let's maybe break it down. So we've talked no injuries, body can do it. Then obviously equipment. I mean, so you say most people have a pair of tackies or running shoes at the time they get to you, even if they are cyclists. But I mean, do you need to change equipment?
So I like to prepare people for comfort, because we can all chase as hard as we want, but if you're not comfortable, you're not going to get very far. So it doesn't need to be the most expensive, as long as the shoes are good. The running shoes, you're not going to get injured. And that's probably where you need to focus a lot of your expense. You want the best shoes for yourself that will work for you, nothing that's not going to work for you. The bike just has to move. It can be a mountain bike, it can be a road bike. As long you're allowed a mountain bike at Ironman, it just has to work properly and be comfortable for you. And the wetsuit just has to fit. These are things that doesn't need to be the most expensive, doesn't need to be the things at the top of the catalog. It just needs to work for you and work on race day, and you be comfortable start to finish.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main things is people are scared that they're going to have to fork out a lot of money, but that's actually quite comforting that you actually don't need hundreds of thousands of rands. You need
it's
lots of time.
More an investment of time rather than money for the.
Especially like a gym membership. Let's say, speaking locally, one of the Virgin Actives. A lot of my guys can do all their training indoors, and that just needs to be a bike at the gym, the pool there. Roads aren't always the safest, and I have a lot of athletes that train the whole way through indoors. They don't share a road with a car because.
I just want to say something about indoor training. There is like out of personal experiences. So I did the Xterra, which you actually swim in that dark water. did all my training in the pool, and then the thing that caught me out was when you actually run into the water, because I was sitting on the side of the pool, get into the pool with a low heart rate, but when you hit the water with a heart rate of 160 because you're so excited, then suddenly the first couple of meters you can't swim because you can't breathe.
Xterra was my first ever triathlon in 2009, and I'm from Durban, so I grew up in the ocean, so I know open water. I trained, I thought I was ready, and I hit that water and I couldn't see my hands underneath, and something touched my leg, and I spent the rest of the 450 meters on my back doing the reverse tortoise or turtle.
No, that's a game changer. I'm used to swimming in the sea, but the black water is not for me.
No. I think that brings us to the next thing. I mean, interesting that people train indoors. So how do you get the data? How do you change?
So I license a software called Training Peaks, which is out of Boulder, Colorado, USA. They are the forefront of the whole triathlon movement and stuff like that. And their licensed software syncs up with your Garmin's, your Polars, all the branded GPS watches. So that's sort of a bare requirement. It doesn't have to be. People can still work on a rate of perceived exertion, but that's just a lot more accurate. Just a heart rate doesn't need to be the most. Just a heart rate, so that we're getting an indication of efforts when the easy stuff is hard or hard stuff is easy. They can track most of it. Doesn't need to be distance and speed, as long as we're getting an indication of efforts, and that's mostly what I look for from my athletes. So that's the bare requirements. But there's a lot of incredibly exciting apps out there which are tracking all your everything. So it all syncs up into the licensed software that I use, and I can track all my athletes from there.
That's amazing. So I think we've done a outline, and it seems like most people, if you give them the chance and enough time, if they're not going to do the Ironman now, but you give them enough time, you can get them through a half an Ironman.
I use golf as a sort of analogy for it. I started golf late, and it was the most intimidating thing for me. A club, tuck in your shirt, you must wear your hat. The golf clubs are so expensive. But now that I'm in golf, I realize you don't need a lot to play golf, there's a lot of clubs out there that you can use, and you don't need all the expensive things and everything. And triathlon's exactly the same. There's an intimidatory factor to it, because when you do see it in a magazine or on telly, it's a guy with 12 abs that you didn't even know there was those extra few abs on a man, riding on a bike that looks like it's from space. And there's a lot of that. But once you're in it, you realize you just need things that are going to keep you comfy, injury-free, and healthy. And it doesn't need to be a massive, massive investment of money for this.
And also it's expectations. I think if you go into it, it's to compete and finish it rather than, win the thing. I mean, we're not talking here about pro athletes. We're talking about the average guy out there.
And that's expectations is a big one, because people do get caught up in the results of the whole thing rather than challenging themselves, and that's where things can get out of balance and stuff like that. But if it's about health and challenging yourself and setting yourself a goal now that you've reached later adulthood and children are growing up and stuff like that, then this becomes a very manageable thing. Training expense in every aspect.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I mean, in our Innersight program, one of the big things that we focus on, and we say 80% of longevity is actually just moving, just getting past being a couch potato. And I mean, what you've now pictured for us is with a little bit of, because actually half an hour every day is actually not a lot. You just have to get up. So get past that. The longest meter in the world is that one out of your bed. So if you get out of your bed, train for half an hour every day, you can get to doing a half Ironman. So and I actually, before we started the podcast, and in these podcasts we have little epiphanies as well. And for me, that is actually, you will pick up if there's something health-wise. It's not always necessary to do an Innersight massive assessment before. It'll be nice, but you can get most people from zero to be a hero in this in, let's say, 18 months. Am I correct? If I say 18 months is a good goal if you look at time-wise. I mean, don't think 6 months if you come from nowhere, or 6 months enough?
6 months is... I call them the bucket listers, and I get a lot of them, and they're good for business. It's maybe not always the healthy, but they come with a 4-month, 3-month, 6-month goal. It is quite a steep curve then, because you have to jam all of these in, and the investment in time also comes from your families or your work or anything like that. So 6 months is from the couch, I think, is still cutting it a bit fine. I have an athlete that just signed up in the Northern Cape, and he's into his 50s now. His business is successful. His children have grown up, and he's given himself 18 months for the half Ironman in Mossel Bay. And we've started with walks. It's walks now, and he does Pilates and walks, and we've introduced a bit of indoor cycling. And the guy hasn't ridden a bike in a few years, and now he's sitting on the saddle for 30 minutes and complaining. But he's getting it done, and it's a slow build, and he's bought in that it is a slow build. At some point, the ego might kick in, and a few races might pop into the calendar. But for now, that's his, and he's given himself that much time. And it's a way healthier. It's 18 months of your life that you're dedicating to health, which is good for you in the long run as well.
Yeah, especially if you approach it that way, where it's a slow progress. Because one of our pet hates is people that just go full out from the start. Question, we talk about time investment in preparing for this, but like you said at the beginning, that a lot of us can't swim. How much do you put into actually work on the style or the technique of the exercise, or do you use outside people to do that, or what's your approach on that for someone that's maybe not a swimmer and struggle to have a nice style in swimming?
Ideally, if there's an external coach or someone at their local gym or their local school pool that could help them, that does help a lot. But I do a lot of coaching with video, so I ask them to send in a video, because and I started swimming late, and it's very difficult. But it's one of those things that you work on week by week, picking out the worst error and then eliminating that as a thing. But you're invested in this, and people do want results very quickly, and that's maybe the part of Ironman they don't speak about. There is nothing that's going to shine brightly very early. You're not going to run your fastest 10K. You're not going to bike like a monster very quickly. It's a slow, long, invested process. And the swimming, it's about getting in the pool, and the more you swim, the better you get at it. And then I with video, just short 10-second clip, I can say this is happening, and they slowly work on it and stuff like that.
Okay, and if we then, so we've got someone that's not trained, let's say they're maybe a little bit overweight. Nutrition is such a difficult, I mean, coming from, you have to get someone to lose weight, but do you tell them what to do, or do you have a goal weight-wise, or what do people think? Because, I mean, if you see a proper triathlete, they've got a body fat of like 8%. But, I mean, if you see most people that finish a half Ironman, they probably have a body fat of 16 to 18% rather than a really skinny. But how do you think about nutrition? And
so the weight loss is, I think, one of the biggest hurters of training for an Ironman, because people to lose weight think they shouldn't eat when they train. And it's the worst thing. And women do this more than men. And they will ride or run or swim fasted, not fuel, and not eat afterwards because it's burning fat, and then binge later in the afternoon because there's a calorie deficit. So the number one thing I do with people that want insight, it's a very personal thing. So I would like someone to rather see a nutritionist than a dietitian. But if anyone ever does ask for insights, my number one thing is to eat at training. Eat before. I like that analogy. Fat burns in a carb fire. So you start the fire before the session, fuel it during, and fuel it afterwards. And I try and teach that principle. I have a basic little spreadsheet which simplifies it down into color coding, like eat here, don't eat here, if you wanted to lose weight. But the weight loss it's actually a main instigator of all of this. Is it starts with I want to lose weight, and it's a park run or this, and then it just builds straight into. They throw the comrades word at me as well. That freaks me out. But only in South Africa can you go from a 5K to a comrades in about a year. But nutrition is a massive part of this, and it is the fourth discipline of all of this, is getting that right. But the weight loss thing is, the weight loss happens. You can't keep weight on your body if you're training every day of the week, 5 out of 7 days of the week, and if you're doing in the right zones. But people just undereat. So the main principle I teach is to eat when you train and fuel your body. It's free. Eat when you train.
Yeah, we've actually listened to quite a good podcast recently about the females, especially the females on the eating and the fasted exercising, and how bad it is for them. That's on the Huberman Lab, actually, that podcast. And I think for all female endurance athletes should go listen to that episode.
It's we all want that body. We no matter what, we all aspire to have that veiny leg and 8-pack and all that. And if any one of those athletes had to be interviewed, they would all just say how much they're eating during their training, and especially the women. It's something that they get wrong very often. They're just fast.
It's quite interesting. I mean, I read something today about Jonas Vingegaard, and he said that the main change in cycling happened in the feeding, that you have to feed more and more and more, and they had to train their guts so much to get that much carbs in. They are actually eating a lot more than a few years ago, and the nutritionists helped them to actually eat more. And it's just so counterintuitive. I mean, it makes me think straight away of our zone 2 training. I mean, going slow for long just builds more aerobic capacity than anything, but it's so counterintuitive that people just don't do it. And I presume then you also do a lot of zone 2, slow distance, long stuff that.
Yeah, and that falls in line with when athletes do start with training and all that, is they're very surprised and often don't like just how easy you have to go. And if there's a podcast on the Kenyans when they do their Monday recovery run, they're running at 8.5 minutes a K, but they are running. They're not walking, they're running. They actually slow it down so much that they're allowing their body to recover and keep moving while they think. And if they can run that slow, us normal people can run that slow. That's the only downside to this Ironman training, is there's nothing exciting. I'm not asking you to run your fastest 21K now this weekend. It's coming later. So it's a lot of easy, long, slow training, and then fueling for all of it.
And that's the curse of the century, is that instant gratification and the Strava, pushing you to do all your best. which is counterproductive for what you're doing.
The Strava
Strava segment is probably worse than the comrades.
that's that's a scary one. If I see PRs and KOMs on these sessions on Strava, it just freaks me out. Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. It's like, and it just comes back to trust the system again. I mean, we are in our build up to the Innersight is like, trust the system. The system will shake it out, the things that bother. So you must just keep doing the easy stuff. And I mean, with us now, like the easy stuff is like the cholesterol, the hypertension, but people want to have their genetics tested. I mean, we've now realized genetics is like the tip of the iceberg. Do the big base stuff first. And that's actually what you're saying as well. I mean, getting to a half Ironman is actually quite boring if you think about it, but most people can get there. I mean, it's very much like we say, most people can have a good long life if they put the right blocks in place.
No, absolutely. I mean, that we talked about fueling, and obviously the other side of the equation is recovery. I think that forms quite a big part of what you're doing. And also we see it in when people start to exercise, they often overdo it. But obviously the recovery is not just from the running, it's from life as well.
People what's the word I'm looking for? They lost the word there. They don't realize just how much stress there is on their body, and it's, I like a stress score out of 100 or 10 or something for each day. And people don't realize that training, no matter how easy or hard of it, does add to that score. And I know for a lot of people, it's a release from the day. Had a hard day, go for a run, gym, and everything. But there's only 10 or 100 points per day, and that adds to it. And so I think people misjudge just how much training can help and then add to it. And so recovery, if it has been that hard day, stressful meetings, child in hospital, traffic all day, and then going to run, and it is meant to be a harder run, and then they do it, but they know it has been a hard day, they've just added to it, and recovery from those days becomes harder. And that's where I try and add a lot of value as well. When they said to me, today was hard, what should I do? I say, scrap the bike, go for a walk, go for an easy swim. And I encourage athletes to speak to me and say to me, listen, it's not going to work today. I can't get an hour and a half bike in. I said, well, it's cool. Just do a 30 minutes, very slow run, so that we can manage that stress on the body, physical, emotional, all of those stresses, because then the recovery becomes a lot easier. So now we're not trying to put out a big fire. We're now putting out a small fire. And the nutrition and all those things help. But I think a lot of it is just realizing stress on the body is stress on the body. And once you understand that as an athlete, you start to recover a lot better.
So you use a score system to guide you, but do you also use other tech like with the Training Peaks app and HRV and things like that? Or
so for Training Peaks, what Training Peaks does, it scores each workout you do. That you set a threshold for an athlete, and your threshold is basically what you could hold for an hour at maximum effort, whether it's 5 minutes a K or 6 minutes a K or 200 watts or 150 heart rate. It's your threshold per athlete, and those we do them through some testing, or just by a lot of the data that's built up, we can gauge where it's at. And Training Peaks will also set it automatically. Each workout is scored on that intensity and duration versus your threshold, and each day is then scored. And I then have a performance management chart, which is then averaging out those scores, and I can see straight away who is overstressing and who's not actually stressing themselves enough. And that's, you get a lot of those athletes that aren't actually really pushing anything on the body. But then the watches, and I use Garmin as an example, are giving you your HRV, your heart rate variability. They're giving you a lot of data now, which is amazing. Apple Watch as well. And so they're telling you if you're in a good recovered state or overstressed state. So once you buy into the data, and I mean, that also becomes a little bit intimidating because it is a lot of numbers that are thrown at athletes. But if you do trust it with your coach, they'll manage it for you. But any triathlete becomes super obsessed with it, and they love all those things.
Question there is, when it comes to race day or the days leading up to race day, do you ask him to put their watches away? Because you don't want to see negative data just before then.
Just before Comrades this year, my athlete's watch told him he was overreaching the day before. And I get a photo of it, and I'm like, well, I got to trust the data, but there's a lot of play at that. He's nervous, he's anxious, he probably hasn't slept all the night before and stuff like that. And there's a lot going into it. So the watch is probably accurate, but I try and tell him that it's not, and speak him off the ledge.
Yeah, and I think having trained with a coach now for a few years, I think that's the one thing that's nice about a coach like you is you standing outside and looking in and saying, I know, just trust me, I've done this now with hundreds of athletes. So, yeah, and just trust the system. I wouldn't have made you overreach on the day before. And maybe that's also one of the messages. Anyone can do it, but anyone can do it with help. Don't try and get.
I think just trying to do it yourself just adds in more, more stress into the whole system. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, I did my first epic with some Excel spreadsheet that was sent to me from someone, and it was actually not a great experience. Whereas now I pitch up and it's a lot different. So I think that if that could be my message from having done a few of these long races, is get a coach, trust your coach. It's more important to get a good coach than it is to get good equipment. I think that's and then you've got a partner that you're accountable to. I think that's the other part, is if you're not accountable, then you just don't do it. Because let's be fair, you don't feel like it every day, but there's nothing better than having trained. That endorphins, and I think that makes us all of us in this room makes us tick.
The coach also, and maybe it sounds like I'm advertising my business, but I mean, it's when you're time crunched, you will always pick what you favor. So if you only do have an hour tonight, you will go and run because you love running, or you will go and cycle. So you will invariably skip the one that you don't want. And most athletes go too hard on the easy days and they go too easy on the hard days. And that's where that coach just adds a lot of value. Unless you're very in tune with your body and you know exactly what you're doing. I think just any external party, whether you get someone you can trust to help you with it, just have a look from above and see what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe another piece to talk about is the mental piece, because if you do an Ironman, you are the man or the woman on your own, so you need an accountability partner. Whereas when you do something like the Epic or one of the longer Wines to Wales, or for our international listeners, these are longer type races in South Africa, 3 hours plus, and there you have a partner that actually is also training. But I think the nice thing is that you have to have someone accountable with you. And I think coming back to where we started and why we're doing the podcast, the 40-year-old guy that's couch potato that wants to do a half Ironman now needs someone to take him through the steps. He's not going to just download a Training Peaks program himself and get through it. You need someone to be accountable and have someone on the other side of the phone, as you say. And so I don't feel like today, then you are the motivator as well. And once the excitement of entering, deciding, entering, buying that new pair of shoes, once that starts to wane and you're now into the 4th month of your program, and maybe it's a cooler month or something like that, and the excitement's gone, people aren't giving you kudos on Strava anymore, or just the same people, no more comments, they're not wishing you well. That's where the motivation, and that's where the allure of these big events like the half and full Ironman really channel what you need to do, is because when it's at the darkest times and you have to go out there and do those sessions by yourself without anyone tapping you on the back and get it done because you know you needed to do it, that's what sets these people apart. And that's where you really, really gain a lot. If I'm 100% honest, the race is actually an anticlimax, because there's a lot of people and stuff like that, but it's the training, it's challenging yourself, it's getting up in the morning, going in the evening when the motivation's at the absolute low. It's invariably when you need to be training the most, and those two lines separate the most, and that's where you really find who you are and challenge yourself and get it done. And I mean, going to ride by yourself on a Saturday, or sitting on an indoor trainer for 2.5 hours, 3 hours on a Saturday for what seems pointless on this one day, but it's fitting into a massive puzzle coming to race day. And that's what I really, people find themselves in entering these races, especially when you're in your 40s, 50s and life has passed you by a little bit and now you really want to challenge yourself. Those are when it really sparks a big fire inside. Yeah, I think maybe for us then, I mean, we will get a lot of people through the door doing the Innersight program and trying to find where their health is. So talking about longevity again, the 90-year-old, we talk about the marginal decade. So that 80 to 90, you want to be a very good, strong person. So we're talking a health span, and where we test fitness as part of the VO2 max that we and strength in there, and this actually fits in so nicely with what we do, and that we actually have points of reference and say, you know what, there's a guy, let him take you through the process. And actually you don't have to be in Cape Town even to train with you, or you can be in Croatia or Australia or wherever and still be trained. Yeah.
And that longevity is something that I like. The race and the entry and a South African mentality is to have a massive goal. But once people find that this training is so good for you and so healthy for you and changes everything about your day and becomes part of your lifestyle, then the events are, the second tier of all of this. Your health becomes the first tier, the main goal. And people that buy into that and really believe in that and go alongside with health programs and stuff just see very quickly how healthy this is for them and how much longer it's going to take them into their lives.
Yeah, and we say 80% of what you do should be how you move. So I just have one question there. I don't know if you do formal VO2 testing, but that's quite a question we face quite a lot, is how close does the VO2 max of a Garmin watch these days, because obviously the algorithms are getting much better. Is it close if you have a cycling VO2 max of, let's say, 52? How do you see that? Do you use it?
I'm still a little bit wary of it because I think the number fluctuates a little bit too much based on where you are in the training phase, and it's not really based on any specific testing. And you guys will be able to answer them more honestly than me. But it is a good indicator, and it is, if you're in a peak point, invariably does go up with that peak point, and they do match alongside. And if they're not, we have to investigate why is it coming down when we should be going up. But as far as I know, the VO2 is not that shiftable in your thing. You're kind of implanted with one that you kind of stick to for the rest of your life with a slight variance. But it is a great indicator and is nice. And I check mine every morning in the shower. I go through all my little stats on the watch and I check mine every morning just to hope that there's been a bump. But I think a lot of testing on the running has got quite close. I don't think the cycling one is as close yet, but I think the running one is a lot closer than the cycling one.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit like following the markets. Don't try and day trade. Follow the trend. It's
absolutely.
Just see where your trend is going. It will move if you're getting fitter. That's the main thing. Not everyone can have a VO2 max of 70, but what we aim for, because how we see it, you will lose 10% from the age of 30. You will lose 10% of your VO2 max every decade if you do the same thing from there on. So, and we aiming for
to actually prevent or delay the decline in the VO2 max. That's our approach to it. And to do that, you need to keep on exercising, and you need to keep exercising consistently, not do an event and then take off 6 months. Is that exactly what you said, that daily exercise for long term? And I think the data there on the skiers, the long life skiers of Norway shows it that that's the way to go. If you want to have longevity, is that consistency in your training and just move.
Dave, I'm going to say we can probably talk about this for another 2 hours, but if you have like a nice success story, if you have someone that you moved, because there are people going to listen and say, can I do this? Maybe if you've got someone to say that you've got a 38-year-old that went on and did a Ironman and a half Ironman, or just he was a friend of mine and I helped him. He's a financial investment planner, all the numbers guy in the northern suburb in Cape Town, married, 2 kids, gained a lot of weight, picked up a lot of weight, started suffering with knee problems because of the weight gain, just from an everyday life without the activity, because he was carrying a lot of weight, visible. He, one of those slow builds where you all of a sudden realize now you've gained a lot of weight. So when we started with
I think it was a 10K was his first goal, and it was slow movement and managing the knees because the knees were going to go. And he did end up having a knee surgery in that before, and then Ironman became a goal. And he was okay on the bike. He was terrible in the pool, but he had a bit of running and he had the knee surgery. And so Ironman was the goal, and he was turning 40. So that was the goal. And it was a slow build. It was exactly what we spoke about. It was just getting it done. And very demanding job, a lot of time spent on the work, and it was late evenings within reason. So I always, my to keep balance is always family, career, sport. If you can keep that order, you should be able to train as hard as you want if you can manage that order. So within reason, he would train early in the night, early in the morning. He would get his weekend sessions done. Often everyone would go ride in the morning. He would go around in the afternoon because it was the only time. And it was a slow 18-month. His name's Sean, and he bought in. He's of means, so he was able to buy any equipment that he did need, but he put it in there and he got it done. He walked the marathon. It was a long day. But there was just nothing was going to stop him. He walked into the evening. A lot of people have left the side of the road by then. They've gone inside. So he's now in the doldrums of the evening. It's dark. The wind is blowing. But he got it done. Cried across the line. Wife was standing there crying. He got it done. He went on to do 3 more. It wasn't a bucket list. He changed his lifestyle. And this was a guy that, doctors have said, listen, don't run. Because he reached 140 kilograms. So he was a unit, and he shed a lot of it. Eating, you automatically change your eating ways just because you realize what the junk is doing to you because you are training hard, and you can feel straight away when you've had junk. Dropped the alcohol and just he felt better, slept better, lived better, and carries on today. He does cycling events, mountain bike events, and keeps going.
Awesome story.
Yeah, I think, and I think that is the main message. I mean, we were going to talk how we get someone out of the couch and into a half Ironman, but I almost feel inspired that everyone can do it. I mean, you must just start moving, and that's amazing. So, if we now switch off the podcast and people want to get hold of you, I mean, have you got a website? We'll link to it if you give it to us. But how do they get hold of you?
So yeah, mostly through the website. It's wingmansport.com. It all comes through to me. I get a lot of word of mouth referrals, obviously, for everyone's success story. They're luckily telling a friend, and then they come through. And then it's a phone call and just finding out what and where you need to go. But like I said, they've already entered the event, so it's easy from there. Yeah.
Oh, and it's nice to have a friendly face on the other side. Get yourself exercising, and I feel like I want to do half Ironman now. Thank you very much for coming in today, David.
Thanks, awesome.
Thanks
awesome.
a lot.
Awesome.
Disclaimer. This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your healthcare provider. No doctor-patient relationship has been formed through this podcast. The content here is for information purposes only.